Alright, problem number 10. Find the derivative of this function. Well, first I'm going to do it without using the chain rule because you can do this without using the chain rule. It just takes more work. So I'm going to show you both ways. If you want to just see how to do it with the chain rule, then fast forward. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the 1/4 out front and write it as a coefficient there. And I am going to expand that x minus 4 inside parentheses here, though. So I'm going to get x squared minus 8x plus 16 plus, I'm going to pull that 1/16 out, and I'm going to expand my y stuff. So y squared plus 4y plus 4, that equals 1. And now I'm going to multiply by each of these denominators multiplied together. So 4 times 16 is 64, because think about what happens if I multiply everything by 4 times 16. Well, on the left I get 4 times 16 over 4, and my 4's cancel, times x squared minus 8x plus 16, plus 4 times 16 over 16, where my 16's cancel, times y squared plus 4y plus 4 equals 1 times 4 times 16. And I'm actually just going to leave it written like that. And now that I'm looking at this, I actually don't want to do that. I'm being silly. If the denominator's there, the 4 and 16, if, you basically want to find the lowest common multiple. So if they don't have common factors, then multiply them together. But since I can just multiply everything by 16, that's going to be a much easier way to go about this. So let's go ahead and undo some of this stuff. Let's multiply everything by 16, because then I have 16 divided by 4 is 4, 16 divided by 16 is just 1, and 1, I'm sorry, multiply by 16, and then, well, no, I said that right, my bad, I'm crazy, and then take the 1, multiply that by 16, and you get 16 right there. So, now, what can I do? Well, I can distribute everything in. 4x squared minus 32x plus, what's 4 times 16? Well, that's the same as 4 cubed, which is 64, plus y squared plus 4y plus 4 equals 16. And now I can take the derivative piece by piece. The derivative of 4x squared with respect to x is 8x. The derivative of negative 32x with respect to x is negative 32. The derivative of 64 is 0. The derivative of y squared is 2y, but remember we need to multiply that by a dy dx. Anytime you're taking the derivative of a y term, you will always multiply by dy dx. Plus, the derivative of 4i is 4 times dy dx because of what I just said. And then that is plus the derivative of 4, which is 0, equals the derivative of 16, which is 0. So now I need to collect these dy dx terms and move everything else over. So I'm going to factor out the dy dx from my, that looks sloppy, dy dx. I'm going to factor that out from my 2y and my 4, and I'll be left with, in parentheses, the 2y plus 4 equals, I'm going to subtract everything else over. So I'm going to subtract 8x and add 32. So I'll write 32 minus 8x right there. And now think about that last step. What do I need to do? Well, we need to take dy dx, and we need to divide everything by that 2y plus 4 to get dy dx by itself. So I get 32 minus 8x divided by 2y plus 4, which I can simplify this a little bit, it's a little easier if you factor it. It could help you identify important pieces a little easier. So first off, notice that everything is a multiple of 2. So I can divide everything by 2, but I'm going to show you that in a cool way. From my 32 minus 8x, I'm going to factor out a negative 8 from my x term. And I'm going to factor out a negative 8 from 32. Well, what's 32 divided by negative 8? Well, 8 times, 4 equals 32. So that means I will be left with a minus 4 right there. Divided by the 2y plus 4, let's factor out that 2. What are you left with? Y plus 2. And so we can simplify this. Negative 8 over 2 is going to give us a negative 1 I can't do math. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4 times my x minus 4 divided by my y plus 2. And I have it nice and factored and pretty. So there you have my derivative. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to the beginning of this problem, and I'm going to show you how to take the derivative of this using the chain rule, because it's actually a lot easier. I'm going to use the chain rule combined with the constant multiple rule, which means I'm going to pull these coefficients out front and then take the derivative of the stuff that's left behind. So what I'm saying is I'm going to pull this 1/4 out and multiply that by the derivative of 2x minus 4 squared. So what is that derivative using the power rule? Well, the power rule says multiply, power rule and chain rule. The chain rule says, power rule says, take that 2, multiply it down in front. Chain rule says, leave the insides, that x minus 4 the same. Power rule says, subtract 1 from the power, so the 2 goes to the 1. Chain rule says, multiply by the derivative of the inside. Well, the inside is x minus 4. The derivative of x minus 4 is nothing more than just 1. And so, move that parenthesis over. There you have my x term. Plus, constant multiple rule says I'm going to pull that 1/16 out front. And then we can go ahead and use chain rule and power rule to take this derivative. Power rule says go ahead and take that 2, multiply it down in front. Chain rule says leave the insides the same. Power rule says subtract 1 from the power, so that expression has a power of 1. And then chain rule says multiply this by the derivative of the inside. And the derivative of y plus 2 is dy dx. And so there you have that, equals the derivative of the right-hand side is 0. And so now I can go ahead and solve this for dy dx. Well, what do I need to do? Well, I need to subtract this whole expression right there. So let's go ahead and say dy over dx, that whole thing times this ugly expression, 1/16 times 2 times y plus 2, boom, 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 equals all of this stuff subtracted over. So negative 1/4 times, let's go ahead and combine that 2 and that 1/4. And write that as 2/4, which is 1/2. So negative 1/2 times x minus 4. There we have that. And now how do we get dy dx by itself? Well, we need to multiply that 16 up. And so we're going to have 16 divided by 2. We're getting dy dx by itself. 16 divided by 2, because I'll have 16 over the 2 from that negative 1/2. 16 over 2 is 8. So I'll have a negative 8 times my x minus 4. And then chain rule says take, no, I got into my weird thing. Chain rule doesn't say that. But if I'm multiplying by all of this, I need to then divide by all of that. So I'm going to get over 2 times y plus 2. And notice, just like before, we ended up with that same form. Negative 8 over 2 is the same as a negative 4. So negative 4 x minus 4 over y plus 2. We got to the same exact point with much fewer steps.